Hiya, this is Kitten Features, and you're listening to ShowX Live with Ken in the student accommodation all the way in Scotland. Wait, that was years ago. You're listening to ShowX Live with your favorite Scotsman Ken, currently residing in the US of A, and Wayne, mostly from Colorado, but spending way too much time in the Howling Abyss instead of Summoner's Rift. Enjoy the show!
Hey, everybody, and welcome to the show. You are listening live at 2 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. GMT, this Sunday, the 10th of May, 2020. And right off the bat, I want to say Happy Mother's Day for all of us here in the United States, to all of our moms and such. So happy Mother's Day, everyone, and welcome to the show. As always, we're joined by our good friend Ken. How you doing today, sir?
I'm very good. Thank you very much for hosting as usual today. I very much appreciate it. And Sarah says, "Is that a new intro?" It was new about 2-3 weeks ago. Yeah, it's kind of new.
Sarah is just
compared to the previous one, it's very new.
Yeah, that's very true. Very true. So, welcome everyone. Hey, right off the bat, I want to give you guys a little problematic update. We had been in communication to get the accidentals on today's show. But due to some little hiccups in the stream, as you will, we have not got hold of them yet today. So we will see whether or not they still show up today. Admittedly, they had other things going on, and so we completely understand if they don't make it. But we'll keep in communication. We'll let you know if they do come on, that we'll join them in, and if we set them up for a future time frame, we'll let you guys know. So apologies for right off the bat for any that are jumping into the stream right now, expecting the accidentals to be on and with us right now. We are hoping that does happen still during this show, but we will see. All right, so
we're very excited to have them on and hope they're okay. Right. Also, I just noticed on the stream, I was seeing with my camera being jittery. Look at that. That's horrible.
I was telling you that it was coming through a lot slower than it had been, and that's the part I didn't understand.
Shall I restart the camera, just see if it looks if that fixes it?
Well, so my question for you, Ken, would be: does it look like that on your cut of the stream, or is that?
My screen over there looks perfectly like I'm seeing my hand wave in real time right now. But
so it's something about the share that's coming on from that screen.
So let me restart the Skype share as well then. I mean, it'll take 2 seconds. And I don't think anybody wants to see me jitter around the screen like this all day. So
come on, we can totally see Ken doing like the robot over there as he's bouncing around, waiting for, the stream to connect and is broken, as we're going to start seeing his internal setup there. Let me give him the love of turning off what we see from Ken until he gets it sorted.
Okay, that should be restarted now. So how's that?
I'd say that it doesn't look much better. That's why I was curious about what's causing the jitters.
Let me try changing the. Yeah, it can't be the camera that's the problem.
No, it's not the settings on the camera at all. It's something about the actual stream, the actual connection from that computer
weird.
Out. So.
Do you mind if we restart the Skype then? I'll restart the Skype quickly.
Okay, you can do the Skype call on that one real quick. So, as Ken gets that going, and we will wait for his call to come back on from the video source. There we go. Bring that one back in, and we'll see if this cleans things up at all. Because there's something about just how the
okay, do you hear me?
The share was going. I hear you just fine, Ken. And so let's see.
I don't hear you.
Uh-oh. So we'll see what Ken gets set up there. Yeah, he's coming through fine. It's funny because the audio sounds great. It's just the video that's doing weird things, which is so funny. And so I wonder what about that broke everything for him. Let's see. And I want to double check.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad you hear me, but I don't hear you at all, sir.
Let's see as he goes through. So for him, the and it should still be, yeah, I'm bouncing at him just fine. So it's not on my end. Let's see. Ha! So we'll see what comes through with that. But yeah, Sarathus, so we have been playing with, adjusting, trying to get things set up cleaner on the show each week. And so part of what we did is a new intro. We figured that things had changed so significantly over time between both Ken moving over to Michigan and now being in the States, and me being far removed from any vans that might have been in my possession for a short period of time, that it was far past time for us to update the intro to some degree for you. And so that is what you're seeing. What you're also getting is that we've been trying to make it so that our video quality is up a little bit. And so what we've done to kind of help that out has been to adjust essentially our cameras. Since we both do digital photography and have DSLRs, we found means to plug those expensive cameras into our feed. And so in that way, we could be seen a little prettier to you than just using our regular webcams. So that's, Serathis, what you're seeing from us today. All right. So
yeah, it looks good, but the problem is obviously now it's in this jittery thing. I don't know what's going on. It's annoying me.
That's all right. We'll figure it out again between this show and next week's, because again, this is all work in progress and we keep tweaking it as we go. But as we kick off today, let's go ahead and jump in with a little bit of
Dysfunctional Deviations.
As we kick in with today's show, what things have we been up to in the last week that have not been geeked? And so, Ken, what have you been up to?
So one of the things I wanted to bring up today was we had a little discussion about talking points, or talking points being the form of communications. So this idea that, so I've always taken it for granted that whenever somebody wants to contact me, I will bend to whatever is required, right? So if somebody says to me like, "Hey, can you WhatsApp me?" For example, I didn't have a WhatsApp, and I actually deleted my WhatsApp before I came to the US because I wasn't using it at all. But then when I got here, some of my colleagues use WhatsApp and aren't comfortable with adding people on Facebook. So I agreed and said, sure, I'll get WhatsApp. And so I also have a friend who's a Chinese friend who uses WeChat, which is the most popular communication form in the world, I believe, actually. But because
if you just go by numbers, because China, yeah.
Exactly right. So I got that thinking, well, yeah, I mean, I'll only talk to this one friend there, but, you know, maybe other people use in the future. It's like 2 meg or something. Like the app is tiny. It doesn't bother me, right? And so I have all these different communication mediums that I'm happy to talk to people with. And I've met a couple people in the past who are like, I don't actually use that. So can we talk on something else? And I'm like, that's not that big. Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, and it's just odd, isn't it? Because I think nowadays in the pandemic as well, there's so many forms of communication. For example, we use Skype for the show. We could also have used Discord. We could also have used Zoom. So
these are all things that we have played with in the past to some degree, because we've done shows back in the past where we used Google Hangouts because we were using that as originally our video wall, because we used to love having to see, or the ability to see, all of your faces on while we were talking and interacting with. And we played with Skype has been our longest running. We played with Discord when it became the new hotness for pretty much what everyone uses when gaming right now. Because prior to that, right, if people remember when we were chatting, we were using for audio TeamSpeak back in the day. Before that, we were using, what was the one that we had before TeamSpeak? That was like the old one,
Ventrillo.
Yeah, we were using Ventrillo for a long time, then TeamSpeak. And it's funny because tracing all the way back to those days, even when it just came to gaming communication, we would have I was going to say fights, but disagreements on which app people wanted to use and were comfortable with, to the point where I made command decisions for VtW to jump on TeamSpeak because of some of what it was offering over Ventrillo, because Ventrillo hadn't been updated for I don't even know how long. And then eventually pushing us over to Discord with VtW, as TeamSpeak required us to maintain these different servers and things like that. And so I have found in my own experience that a lot of people get very focused on specific or used to certain ways of communication, certain applications or tools. And sometimes it can be a challenge, especially as you want to bring groups together. And this kind of came up because I was talking about ways to communicate even with guests coming on the show, that, you know, figuring out what is their ideal means of communication outside of what we do for the show with Skype. And just for your guys' awareness, we use Skype between Ken and I because it has allowed us to have certain controls over the video and audio feeds, where some of the other applications don't give you as much direct control. But at the same time, we're in a constant adaptation and adjustment period where new technology is just that. Technology is new and it's constantly changing. So we try to
Sarah
keep up.
says you would use MSN if you're very old. I remember using MSN. We also used IRC for the chat for so long for this show because it was just a relic from the old days. But I remember using it when I was a kid, using IRC.
And it's funny because that's the thing. I used IRC originally back in the early 90s on regular dial-up into... At the time, it wasn't even like before it was the internet, or when few people were on the overall broad internet. And I was connecting through my father had his port into the internet was CompuServe, a more direct dial-up service like AOL, like Prodigy, and some of those front ends. And we were getting on through that, and then getting to the internet to do things like Internet Relay Chat, IRC, and things like that. But yeah, communication is an interesting because it goes beyond even the gaming side of what we're talking about to, as we're in today's connectivity world, and especially as people have been social distancing and basically forced to be home, we're seeing this expansion or these pushes as to new ways of communicating and connecting. Obviously, Zoom, which we've used, is the buzzword of the day, right? When it comes to video conversations.
Oh,
Zoom.
absolutely. Absolutely.
And it's something that it came out of, in my opinion, nowhere. Like Zoom wasn't a thing. Social distancing happened, and all of a sudden there was this new Zoom app that everybody was jumping on, which in my opinion really didn't add anything or change anything from what already has existed with all these other chat options. I think the only thing they really added that others didn't have at the time was the whole replace your background like built in.
Yeah, I mean, I think Zoom was more popular because of the infrastructure. I think with Skype, it was quite tough to have video calls with large amounts of people, and you couldn't really set meetings within Skype. Microsoft Teams was kind of a replacement for that, but that was very inside institution sort of thing, right?
Your business or company, needed to be using Microsoft's Teams to know it even existed.
Yeah, but Zoom, you can, as long as you have a subscription, you can use, I think you can have more than 5 people in your calls and meetings that you schedule and such. And so that works out fine because it's multi-institutional. And I know, like, for example, working in university, it's very useful having the ability to talk to people from different universities. For example, I work with some people in Scotland at the same time as here, right? Like so I'll send them a Zoom link, and we can all just jump in and chat the way it should be. Whereas if we were on Microsoft Teams, it would be really difficult because they wouldn't be part of the organization, so we would be able to invite them in easily, and so on. But I think back to the Discord, TeamSpeak, and Ventrillo stuff, I think the thing that really made... So Ventrillo was just a bare bones VoIP service, voice over internet protocol, right? You could just use it to talk to each other, and that was pretty much it. You could add channels and such, but generally speaking, it was just for the chat. TeamSpeak added a little bit more to that. You could add filters and such, and it had some additional plugins and the likes. It felt like a slightly improved. Discord was sort of like, guys, come on, catch up. We're in the modern era. Let's actually, have some stuff here that's useful. So it has chat functions, it had hashtags, it had links. You could access it in a web browser, or you can download the software, and it had apps available on phones. You could use hotkeys. It links in with different games and stuff, so you can see when somebody's playing a game. So it's like a gaming client. I think it's also got its own gaming store and such now. Like, it really jumped in on that lack of modernization in that space of communication for gaming in particular.
Well, and they did something...
Technically speaking, TeamSpeak and Ventrillo aren't just gaming, but Discord really is.
Well, Discord's beyond that. I know a lot of people who use Discord to just communicate beyond gaming, to do like
Really?
you would. Oh, yeah. I have groups I know who use Discord to coordinate various activities. There's Discord groups for neighborhoods and stuff like that, where they say, hey, we communicate for our neighborhood. If you want to chat on Discord, here's where, and things like that, where I think it's taken off from our perspective from the gaming community. And like you said, it's, it allows all this other customization and tie into APIs of other things to let you be more aware of the social aspect of what people are doing. But another big piece I think that that Discord took over from the things like TeamSpeak and Vent were what you were saying, thing you were just saying about the video chat service and why Zoom picked up. You can basically drop someone a live link to a Discord channel, and they can just click it and jump in on their browser and not actually have to download an API or their own tool. And they made it very lightweight and very easy to share. And so that was a massive thing, I think, for what Discord started pulling on, as well as they've tried to make it so it's as lightweight an application as possible, so it's not taking away from other people's tools or making it so that it's a huge lift to be able to use Discord. I think that's one of the biggest things. One of the things that'll support almost any application or tool, any kind of software's adoption rate is simply how the ease of use is, how simple it is for a person to get on and start using it. And Discord, I think, currently has the easiest access of any of the audio communication tools that are available.
Absolutely. So I just wanted to bring up, because I thought it was just an interesting topic, that, we see these technologies are developed over time, and then there's also the cultural element of what we prefer, right? And I think, generally speaking, Discord's great for me. It's for my online friends, chatting with people online, and when I actually organize gaming. But for example, it's interesting, isn't it? Like, you and I will talk on Skype every single week, but if we jump into League of Legends, we'll both use Discord for some reason, just because it just seems like a standard.
Well, again, it's lighter weight, and the advantage of something like Discord, because we can have set channels, is I can jump into Discord and just look. And this is an invite for everyone who games around our community. If you haven't been playing in the VtW Discord, please do. It's that you can jump in there and just see what other people are playing. I can go to Discord anytime and see where, our friends essentially are spending their time. And lately it's seeing a bunch of people in some of the zombie apocalypse type games, because I know Tabaxian and the indie group hang out there and have played a lot of things using the Discord channel there, that other groups are in there playing a lot of the Call of Duty Warzone. They're coordinating there. We have a Star Citizen chat where a bunch of us will jump in and play. My brother and I, whenever we're playing League of Legends, we'll jump on Discord, and we have a channel for that. And so it's also nice that you can just jump in. And I've seen Hando up in the wanting the game channel and things like that, where you're just, I'm here, I'd like the game. If someone else is here, jump in and chat with me, and we can choose to pick one of the games to play. And there's other times I've just jumped in and listened to people chatting in the game that they're in, because it's like, oh, wow, it sounds like you guys are having a blast. Is anybody streaming this? I'd like to watch. And so I think there's multiple levels to that. I think
Discord also allows certain streaming services internally, right? Like, you can watch other people play games and such.
They added their own, so you can just start a live session in Discord as a very simple way to share with the other people in there to watch what someone's stream is. And we've done that somewhere. I might be streaming on Twitch, especially like Star Citizen or something, and I can try to watch El Campo play on Discord. He'll stream, so I can see what his view is, which has been nice when we're coordinating certain missions of doing things like, hey, we're mining this rock or doing this thing. Where are you at? Like, where are you at in the ship? Where am I at? Okay, as we start coming towards each other. Also very entertaining when we've been watching or doing some of the races that the Blues had set up, to see other people's perspectives of their cars racing and versus what I was doing, things like that. And so all of that was really interesting. I was actually going to ask him, because where we started with this, that whole, and this is for the whole audience, question of preferred apps and things, because not just as we're talking about gaming and stuff, but just your regular everyday communication. Because it's been interesting to me that I know I have friends, Ken and I were talking about this before the show slightly, that I can only really reliably communicate with on certain either applications or tools or services. And so I have my friends who prefer that I actually text them if I want to send a communication or something like that.
What? Like, I have with an SMS?
SMS, actual message to their phone type of text.
Oh my God.
Then I have my friends who somewhat prefer to use Messenger, although I found that it seems like the Facebook Messenger is primarily my preference going out, because I have more people who don't prefer that than do. A lot of them just accommodate me because that's where I tend to message people. And for me, that's
everybody I know uses Facebook Messenger. Everybody.
But that's the thing. For me, I know a ton of people who refuse to have a Facebook account because they don't trust it. Just like I have a ton of people I know who refuse to use anything from Google because they don't trust the company and stuff like that. So it makes sense that there's other tools people prefer. But it's surprising to me where, for me, I've kind of adapted based on who I'm communicating with. And I mentioned the one that I think got you to worse was, I know a friend of mine who, if I want them to respond that day, like within an hour, I have to message on Snapchat, because that is the app that person checks the most often. So
the thing I like most about Facebook Messenger, right, is because say for example, you and I are talking and then you're like, hey, what's the password for the FTP or something? And I'll be like, oh, I can't remember. Let me just do a quick search in my Facebook history. I'll look through all the messages I've ever sent on Facebook and ever received and find it within 2 seconds. It is so useful. It is incredible because I have a history, a log, and it's searchable and I can use it on multiple devices. And I can even search on my phone, which I've done so many times. Like moving here, I got a new social security number. I got another, all these important bits of information. There's somewhere in my chat somewhere that I've sent to like my wife or something, right? So that kind of stuff is super useful. And I just the idea of using Snapchat for me is just ridiculous because you don't have history.
That is the opposite effect, right? Snapchat's whole point is to minimize history, but that's part of the thing, right? The ease of use and functionality that you see in Messenger has allowed you to say this is a great tool for you. I know a lot of people are like, I will not let, Zuckerberg have that information available from me in any format, even if it's encrypted or whatever. And so they just don't trust it. It's funny because along those lines, I mean, I use Messenger a lot. I've been looking out at what other things are there. I have found myself like I had one person that I was having a conversation on Instagram back and forth with. And I actually told them that if we were going to continue communicating, I needed to switch to either Messenger or to an SMS messaging because I don't get alerts from Instagram. And so I was constantly having to like open the app up just to see it. And that was bothersome to me. Like, no, this sucks. You need to go beyond this. And even then, like Copy said, I've known this forever with Copy, does not have any access via Facebook. And so does not exist there. And so when I communicate with Copy, it's either over Discord or through an SMS and things like that. So it's interesting how we have all of these different means of communication.
Well, SMS is just so that's what is most confusing to me. It's so perplexing because one, it requires you to have to spend money, right? Like it costs money to send text, generally speaking, especially across country borders for some reason.
Not anymore. None of my plans.
If I receive a text, this is my British phone number, right? If somebody tries to call me on my British phone, it's going to cost both me and them a buttload of money.
Won't cost me a penny. My plans allow me to call Britain and text Britain for free. Same thing with Canada, Mexico, and a bunch of the other ones. So for me, it's weird. It's gotten to like even.
SMS has a limited number of characters and images you can send within it. Additionally, when you use MMS instead of SMS, it's horrific. It's slow, and that can cost money, and frequently does. Same with SMS. Additionally, the quality of phone calls on cellular, just generic phone call, is really poor quality because it's trying to send as much. It's trying to be as reliable as possible, so sending as little information as it can. So you lose so much quality. Like, I don't know if you've tried phoning somebody on a normal phone and listening to it and hearing what you sound like as well, then calling them back on, say, Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp or whatever, and then listening to that. The quality is astoundingly different. Astoundingly.
It's interesting because I haven't really noticed a major degradation or difference in the two. But I'm trying to think back to instances where I have, because I will agree about it's likely lower quality, but at the same time, voice calling using the actual cellular network and their messaging services tend to be more reliable than others for me, because you have to rely on someone having a decent enough data connection for it to continue on if through other means. Like I have had those like calls through Facebook Messenger and things like that as well, and they're fine. Yeah, I'd even think about the quality of regular calling, but rarely do I just call someone. It's usually a message. And that's, I think, part of the societal change we've seen. Almost universally, when I talk to people, they prefer to receive some form of text communication over audio, over voice.
Yeah, absolutely, right. I saw a Reddit thread about this the other day. It was quite funny. I was laughing at it. It was remembering in sad detail back in the day when you used to have to, well, people would actually just show up to your house without phoning you or whatever, because you might not be in, or you're trying to phone their landline.
You mean my childhood? Yes.
Yeah, right. Like mine too.
Literally running over to a friend's house, knocking on the door and saying, "Can so and so come play?" Yeah. Or are they home?
I also remember when I was 7 years old, I had one friend I didn't like, right? Like this guy, we kept falling out. We used to fight all the time, and I was like, I'm not your friend anymore. I don't want to talk to you anymore. But he kept coming over to my house, right? And it was awkward because he was in my school and stuff. So whenever he would come around after work, school, I would like close the blinds and try to like hide inside, and I'd like say to my mom or dad like, could you tell him that I'm not in? Could you tell him I'm out? Could you tell, like,
the classic,
and
someone else calls and it's like, I'm not here. When it's like calling, back when you'd have a landline to call and someone could call it and someone else would pick up, mom picked up or something, or someone else, you'd be like, no, I'm not here. No,
exactly.
Not here.
But my mom and dad refused to do it. They said, no, go talk to him yourself like an adult, which is, a fair response. So, I was 7. So what I did is hide. I literally just lay down on the ground underneath the window because this kid would walk around the house and look at the windows to see if he could see me. And I was like, I gotta hide. So I remember lying down. Like, we had this huge window in the living room. That didn't quite reach the floor. It had like a foot of space at the bottom before it reached the floor where there was a tiny little radiator thing. And I remember lying down there on my back, looking up and seeing this kid standing above me, looking in the window, peering through the glass.
Oh, gosh.
And looking around, trying to see me. And me just thinking, don't look down, don't look down, don't look down. And thankfully he didn't. But I did eventually talk to him and just tell him to leave me alone, and it was fine. But that's one of those. That's a learning point right there. But yeah, back in the day, that was the norm. People would just show up to your house. How horrible was that? How anxiety-inducing and how weird would it be now? Can you imagine if someone showed your house up to the door?
Now that would probably bother people a lot more because we do know that we all have the communications available to us to easily set up, appointments and stuff like that. It's a challenge because I definitely grew up in a society and time frame where it was okay to just show up on someone's doorstep and say, hey, how's it going? And I know that has changed, and people will often get offended if that was the case now, where they just be like, what the heck are you doing? That is so rude for you to not check with me first. We can do that now. We have the means.
It's an invasion of privacy, and it places a social awkwardness on somebody, because if somebody shows up to your door, you're kind of supposed to be nice to them and welcome them. And if you don't want to do that, like if you don't want to be social, or you're just trying to chill out, or you haven't showered, or you haven't prepared, like that's just rude for you to show up at somebody's house. Additionally, I was on this Reddit thread as well. I was reading. Somebody was saying that back in the 80s, his parents would have baking available every day just in case somebody showed up to the door, so they could give them some so when they came in, they could provide them with a cake,
would you like would you like some of this?
Can you imagine having to bake every day in case one of your friends showed up or one of your family members?
Okay, so the way you phrase that statement alone tells me the difference in how you view that kind of interaction, because I also grew up on a block that we were filled with kids that all knew each other and all played together, and my parents knew the majority of the families who lived on that street. And so with that, there was this whole known thing of just the community connection that our street had. And it was common for someone to come over, knock on the door and say, how's it going? And just want to chat for a minute. And it could be everything from a chat at the door, like, oh yeah, where you'd spend 5-10 minutes just chatting at the door, catching up, to, hey, why don't you come in and sit down? Let's have some tea. And it turning into like an hour or 2 hour conversation. As a lot of times, like my mother was a stay-at-home mom. That was a big part of her social networking at the time, was physically just individually running into people. And so it was almost an invitation, if you had baked goods or something like that, as a welcoming thing, saying, I want people to stop by and visit me. That's a good way for me to break up my day and such, when otherwise I may just be here doing chores. So I would say, yes, it is definitely a change in time frame and how we see things. But back in the day, I would have argued that that was a positive aspect, that people looked forward to random people dropping by. Kind of the imagination, or what I get from stories in fantasy books and stuff. I still see it done where you have remote towns that you never have more than the 100 people who live there. And so any traveler that comes through, it's a really big deal, and everybody wants to interact with them because you get new interactions, new stories, new everything kind of thing.
That's neat. I think that's great. But I think that was absolutely a relic of its time, right? I think now I would be upset if one of my colleagues showed up at my door and sort of expected me to host them. I would probably say to them, no. Feel free to message me. We can organize something, but no, not today. And
See, it is interesting.
If somebody then asks me why not, I'd be like, the fact that you're asking that question shows that you have an expectation that I find very rude, and I would tell them that. I would say that was inappropriate for you to show up and expect me to host you. I think back then the culture was at a point where that made sense. And it's interesting. I think that actually still exists now in the workplace. For example, if I'm in my office door is open, and students and teachers and colleagues are all welcome to drop by and ask me a question or chat to me or whatever. I have an open door policy because I think that's very important in an academic setting, and generally most workplaces I think that's very important, because to have an effective workplace, you need to have good communication. So I think that's very important there. But in my home life, I am of the opinion that one's ability to everybody has a right to solitude in my mind. So I think you intruding upon somebody's solitude that way is rude if it's nowadays. Fair enough if like the cell towers go down or there's an emergency, or if somebody, like if one of my friends knocked on my door and said, my husband or my wife just died, I'd be like, come in, like, of course, anytime. Always drop by if you need me. Of course I'm here for that. But you know what? If it's just for a social call, I'll be like, piss off.
Well, and I do.
What are you doing here?
I do recommend to people in general to control their access, and I think it's perfectly fine if someone does show up to say, "Well, I'm busy right now, but good to see you, and maybe another time." I understand that what you're saying, Ken, about the consideration of like that expectation of hosting kind of thing. That is awfully demanding of someone's time and energy to just show up assuming. I have a different opinion when it comes to like close friends and family. Honestly, if like El Campo showed up on my door, or Shady, if you showed up on my door or something, I would probably drop almost anything I was doing to let you in. The only difference would be like, if we're doing the show right now, I might be like, just a second, answer. And if it's so, I'd be like, hey, you're welcome to come in. I'm busy right now, so hang out on the couch, do something. Catch you after the show. Right. But I still have a nature in me, and I think it comes back from the open door policy my family had always had of just showing up and saying, hey, and accommodating best we could. I would likely do that. So it's an interesting, I understand what you're saying. It's interesting that, Schmitty actually comments in there, same here. So I understand what you're saying, Ken. Actually,
that's interesting, because I think that might be that must be either generational or maybe location difference. Like, I don't know if that's more of an American thing, but I think it was the case in Britain as well. Like, I think that would be the norm as well. But no, I think if you showed up without telling me that you were coming, like all the way from Colorado, I'm like, dude, we could have planned something. This was just inefficient. Why are you doing this? Like we could have had something planned, man. We could have done something cool. So no, I think everybody should still message ahead. I think it's just polite these days.
Well, I do think it is convenient enough to do these days that it shouldn't be a hard thing to do, and it probably just makes more sense to do so. But at
the one time I would turn around my rule on that is 6.5 years ago, a little bit longer than that, on Valentine's Day, Kitten Features showed up at my door in Scotland when she was living in the US. Like, she showed up randomly. She flew from the US to the UK and didn't tell me. I just got home from work. I was in the middle of getting changed and stuff, and I was knocking the door. And I remember I opened it.
I imagine you getting ready to just say piss off and not even answer the door.
That would be funny. No, I was I opened the door and I wasn't happy. Well, I was happy, but like I didn't show happiness on my face. My expression was just like, because I was trying to call her on Skype at the time, because I always called her like as soon as I go home and we'd have a quick chat. And I was like,
oh, this is even
I was
better.
just trying to call you. Like, why are you here? Like, I was just so perplexed. My mind couldn't quite grasp. Like,
I imagine that was the interaction.
Country. Like,
I imagine it was more your brain catching up than it was your happiness or not.
Yeah, exactly. And instead of like helping her with her bags or like jumping with excitement, I was like, I need to go put my clothes on. And I just walked away back to my room and got changed, because I was in the middle of getting changed. And while I processed, and she came in like, why are you happy to see me? And I was like, you're here. Like, I just couldn't. I was in such shock. But that's the one time it's okay, right? Like, if you're getting surprised by like your significant other, I think that's the one person who I think is allowed to void that rule. in that special circumstance. That's it.
Well, I mean, there are aspects, but that is a great story, Ken. That's funny, and I can understand what your brain was doing. That's still just hilarious. And yeah,
well,
I
was literally in the middle of trying to call her, and I was like, "Why is she not answering?"
It was a disconnect.
Like, "Oh, well, it's -5 where she is, so maybe it should be a bit time that I would call her. It's been noon there, and it's been 5 p.m. here, so it should be. Why is she here?"
I love all of that. Like I said, there's just the way there was a disconnect in your brain about what the actuality of what was happening versus your expectation of what should be, and so that's hilarious to me. I did want to get back because I actually do really like this subject as a whole to kind of the ways people communicate. And we've heard not the specifics from our audience, actually. I'm very curious. Feel free to, if you have something long form you'd like to say, to email us in at VtWShowX@gmail.com, or feel free to message it here. But as we're looking at technologies that you use to communicate, I know during this social distancing period, we've talked about Zoom a few times because that's something that got big, and that's something that I've used with both my family and groups of friends, although it's interesting because they're now hitting that if you don't have a premium account, you can't go over 45 minutes, I think it is, without having to restart the call. That's one of the limitations because they're actually, it was smart, right? They did it as a marketing thing where they released all their restrictions that would normally be reserved for a premium account to get people hooked, so that now when they're putting them back on, people might actually pay for premium accounts. In fact, I know like my mother's business has done that because they started using Zoom as a common thing. So I have a curiosity about other things out there because I had mentioned previously Google Hangouts and how that used to be a thing we had played with and thought we had some fun with. Come to find out that apparently Google has let that go, or it is a dying aspect of Google.
Yep.
And instead they now have Google Meet, I think is the new one. Because I know
I haven't even heard of that one.
So my older brother was telling me about it, where they now have Google Meet. I went to their page, meet.google.com, because everything Google has is just whatever it is .google, where they tag it as premium video meetings, now free for everyone. And it has what looks like a similar functionality that you can start a meeting or enter a meeting code and join it. So that's something I'm kind of curious to check out. If nothing else, granted, there's always a risk with anything Google, because if it's on their good idea fairy thing, it can be amazing for a while, and then as soon as they go left and decide it's no longer worthy, it just drops, like Hangout. Earth is saying that he actually likes Google Meet and they use it at their college. I was hearing it from our older brother because he said they use it in business around like Silicon Valley and that kind of thing. All the techies have actually gotten to the point where they're using Google Meet, and so that's something I might check out.
That's pretty concerning as well, though, isn't it?
Well, again, it depends on...
Oh, wow. I just, I'm in there just now playing with it. And in Zoom, I noticed they have a closed captions option, but then you have to like choose somebody to be the typist. And I just noticed that in this, you can turn on captions and it'll just try to interpret it.
The AI just starts kicking and going.
Pretty mediocre, though.
Well, it's going to be the same AI that YouTube uses, right? But in a more real-time sense.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Are you saying mediocre because you're Scottish or because it's bad?
My accent is so weak that most Americans don't even notice that I'm Scottish. They think I sound weird. That's it. Like nobody. I've only had I think 2 Uber drivers who turned to me and went, "Are you Irish?"
Oh, that's funny. Oh, even worse. No, that's great.
I was like, more or less. Whatever.
Yeah,
it's all the same
basically the same. But I am curious, like other technologies people might be using out there. You'd mentioned WeChat as a big thing. And there's, because all over the country, it's also based on what is local for them. And so sometimes that communication when you're international might be completely different than when you're local or whatever your group is. Because I would argue, like we had said before, our gaming group, we primarily converse over Discord. I mean, heck, I remember when we were using Steam's built-in chat and such to communicate for a while. But if nothing else, what I will put out there, regardless of the service you use, although I would like to hear what are best, and I am going to play with Google Meet now just to see what it's about. What are your preferences out there? I'd love to hear, is there something we didn't discuss that people think is the bee's knees and just the best thing out there? And in addition to that, one of the things that I like regardless is that this press for people to stay connected while socially distanced and therefore using technology to talk has done, I think, a great thing for pushing all of these companies to improve their services. Because I've started seeing popular pieces of specific apps migrate into other ones. You know, we had seen where I think when we were first starting how on Skype you could do the blur your background piece and things like that. They've now added the automatic, you can put in a backdrop and such, the same as like what the Zoom meetings has done. And I think that feature has become more popular across video chats now.
It's kind of the norm now. Yeah.
Yeah. And as well as, have you, anyone out there been using those to communicate with groups? Laser Lemon, I've had the opportunity to communicate with a little bit and see or hear about her team's daily meetings they do for communication over Zoom. And she shared with me some of the, they almost have a like game to see which filters they come up with, backgrounds and or full face covered things. And it's funny because it seems like it's become a bit of a not process, but a game in itself of getting prepped for their daily calls by picking out the best either background or something like that. I find that's entertaining to me, and how some of them don't even have to be close to professional. Granted, she works in a creative space, so that might work. Schmitty is saying that WebEx, I had forgotten about WebEx. I've never used that one. And again, MS Teams as another big one that's being used that he's seen. And Copy's saying Discord because I can see when my friends are playing games and they can see when I'm playing games. And it uses less resource than Steam. There is a lot to that. Anyone who can make their chat tool as little impact on your overall processing power so that you can game better, the better. Like best. Thank you. Do that. But yeah, I'm kind of curious what other people are using. Anything else we want to discuss about this before we move on to other things?
No, I've got. I think I'm good with this. So I'm just doing our spam in the chat there, so you can.
Yeah, no, okay. So
don't forget, you can follow us, and if you do follow us, we'll drop a Steam key. And I've been we're pushing that every week, and we've still got loads of games to give out. So be sure to do that.
Big shouts
I've got two more things.
Big shouts to Humble Bundle for allowing us to grab massive game packs of keys that we can share out for Steam games.
Absolutely. So I've got two more random points to bring up, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure thing.
They'll be quicker though. First of all, I've got a quiz after this. I was invited by a few friends back in Scotland to take part in a Zoom quiz starting at the end of the show, actually. So we all were given a topic to be the quiz master of. So mine's is science, which makes sense. So I've written out 10 questions that I'm going to be asking them. They're all mostly quite easy. I went for stuff that's like, high school kind of science-y type stuff. So it's interesting without just being like boring and historical, right? If anybody's interested, I could always read out the questions because I don't think any of them will be listening in. But I'll give a couple of examples. So number one, nice and easy. In biology, what's the powerhouse of the cell? Come on, everybody knows that one. Everybody knows that. Number two was, what does DNA stand for? And don't worry about spelling. How many people are in this Zoom call? Because we're going to be doing it in Zoom, actually. And write your answer in binary. So that'll be interesting to see who can do that.
Look at you pressing the geek.
Look at me what?
Pressing the geek.
Yeah. Well done. Hey, Hando guy, right, mitochondria. And why is the sky blue? What is Ophiocordyceps famous for? What galaxies, other than our own, is closest to our own? Where was the hottest temperature and the coldest temperature ever recorded? Where? I'm asking, not when. Where? And the last one is write down as many digits of pi as you can. Whoever correctly can remember the most wins the point. So
wow.
that'll be the last one's quite hard, but I thought that'd be good fun.
Yeah, I can't go very far in that unless I don't have it with you. If I was at work, I'd be fine because I have my Tower of Pi pen holder that I think does some 1,000 characters of pi.
Nice. And Hando's knocking out quite a few of those, by the way. He's a mitochondria, Neptune, Andromeda Galaxy. Yep, good.
Wow.
Yeah, so a bunch of fun questions that aren't too sciencey. Like they were like joking in the chat beforehand, saying like, "Oh, okay, Ken's going to send us a bunch of like mathematical algorithms that we have to solve." And I was like, "Guys, I failed high school maths. Like, I may be a scientist. That doesn't mean I can do maths." So that'll be fun. And the other thing I want to mention is tomorrow I'm going to I want to say dentist, but I'm actually going to the hospital tomorrow.
Oh.
Um, because I'm talking to one of the dental specialist surgeons about getting my wisdom teeth removed.
Oh, hey, fun.
So yeah, so when I arrived in the US, I was like, oh, I better make use of this healthcare that I'm paying through the nose for it. So I went and got my teeth checked up and did an X-ray and said, yeah, your all of your wisdom teeth are like pointing in the wrong direction towards the rest of your teeth. So, and I was like, I don't feel anything. It feels fine. They're like, yeah, but in the next 5 to 10 years, that's going to get really painful and screw up all your other teeth.
Yeah,
And I
better to
was
do
like,
now before you'd have
so
to do surgery on everything else.
well, they basically said, "Well, it's up to you what you want to do." I mean, like, do you want to get them removed? I was like, "Well, that seems sensible." And I was like, "Is it covered by my insurance? Because that's a thing here." And like, "Yeah, don't worry about it." I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." So, I've never had surgery in my life.
Oh,
I've never been put under. This is all entirely new to me. Um, so I've actually had a couple dreams about it in the past week because the concept is really
oh,
terrifying to me.
wow.
Because I like, there's that thing that everybody's worried about that when you get put under, you might not be able to control your body, but you can still experience it. Um, I have this other stupid fear that perhaps what happens is your ability to store in the long-term memory part of your brain is turned off, but you're still conscious. So you
Huh.
experience all the pain that's like the hours worth of torture effectively, but then you don't remember it. But you experience it. And I was like, that's like a horror scenario, isn't it? Isn't that like absolutely terrifying?
There is a level of, yes, the fear of, oh gosh, actually, I watched one of the Netflix shows I was watching. Something like that basically happened where a person gave someone a drug that made them unable to move and told someone next to them, it's like, this person needs to die. I've numbed them. This is all the horrible things they've done. I've numbed them so that they can, you can kill them without them suffering. And as a way to kind
Okay.
of push a person through a moral dilemma piece. It's the series Happy, and it is insane in every possible way. So I'm not going to try to justify like saying this is a good series or anything like that, or one that's fun in any way or happy in any way. It's bizarre, but in doing so, he then turns to the guy, like whispers to him after she's out of range, and says, "All this did was take away your ability to move. It's not going to allow you to, or you're going to feel absolutely everything that happens to you." But he tells the gal he won't feel a thing. It's painless. It'll be totally fine. And so it's like this whole like, oh, that is messed up that he is able to see and feel everything, but not doing anything like that.
Yeah, it's
Um,
terrifying, right? Like I think that concept is really scary. I had a friend in high school who she had braces for years, and one day she was told, "Yeah, you need to get like four teeth removed, four molars," and she when I saw her the next day at school, her face was purple, like all of her face, and I was like, "Isn't that painful?" She was like, "Extremely." And I was like, oh man, that's terrifying. Basically, like she was showing a video of it afterwards. The dentist couldn't get her tooth out properly, so they'd like put like their knee like on her chest and was
oh,
basically on top of her,
geez.
pulling like this, like a guy, like a big guy, like he's almost like my size, and she's like this little I don't know, a woman at the time, girl, or like this tiny
Oh,
girl, and
man.
he's just like using all of his force, and there's these like metal bars holding her face down. Thankfully, she's unconscious, but she still, afterwards woke up and had all that pain. So I'm like, oh man, I am not looking forward to this. Like, who likes going to the dentist for any kind of painful stuff like this? Second, I'm gonna have to be put under for it. That's terrifying in its own
So,
way. I almost wish it wasn't. I didn't have to go under,
well,
but
so Ken, let me give you my own experience. I have had a lot of dental work done in my time. I had braces as a kid for like 3 years and retainer after that for a year. Um, to support some of that, initially I went in when getting the braces. I had four teeth removed, kind of like right around like this. And that one was in a military hospital where they put me under. And so that one I got in the hospital, injections, out cold. I remember being wheeled in, lights and doctors all over me. And then after, having an IV was the only thing I actually felt from the whole process, was getting that in, because then they put something in it to numb me and said, all right, could you count back from 100? And I think I made it maybe 10 numbers in before I lost knowledge of anything going on. I was out cold. And the next thing I remember was waking up in a hospital bed, slightly elevated with gauze in my mouth, feeling a little out of it, like, huh? Looking around, trying to talk, like seeing my mom there going like, right? Because I just had gauze all through my mouth. And then, because my dad was working at the hospital we were at, going to visit, I think we went to visit my dad once I was finally out of bed, or he might have come down to me. But I remember him playing a prank on me, because I had always commented that the Navy hospital there out in San Diego and Balboa had really good cafeteria, really good food. And so he offered at that point, the one time I come visit him when I can't, hey, we can go down to the cafeteria if you want, and I'll get you whatever you want. And I was just like, you jerk, in the sense that, because I could not eat at that moment. But I remember that one, and the whole experience of that was fine. And afterwards, I really didn't feel anything. Like, it healed well enough. I didn't really have any issues with it. Afterwards, I had all 4 of my wisdom teeth pulled, taken out when I was in high school. And that would happen in Nebraska at a private thing. And when I went to get that done, all I got was a local. And so I basically got Novocaine injected around the corners of my mouth, was not put under. And they simply came in and used like a scalpel to cut the bit of gum line over the teeth because they hadn't fully exposed, and went in there and pulled the teeth just with a local. And in some cases, they had to come in with a drill and grind the rest of the tooth out of there, because didn't come out clean. They cracked it and pulled out the pieces. And that one, I was awake for the whole time. And I will tell you, did not feel a thing. They had put enough local anesthesia there that I heard it all. One of the best or worst, things for me was with the drill going in. One, you can usually feel your face just a little bit, like, vibrate. But the other side of it was when they had to take the little hammer in the crack, like, you feel your face jerk a little bit, but there's no pain. And that by itself was a weird disconnect. Thinking, like, this is going to suck later. But they got everything out.
Like, that's horrible, dude.
No, so
that's
actually,
so scary.
It was fine because I didn't feel it. Afterwards, they stitched up the holes. And then the worst case was, for the next however many days or a week, I had to make sure I'd flush what was open still of the wisdom tooth cavity, or the hole from the wisdom tooth pulled, so that no food got in there. That was really the biggest issue they had, was just to make sure nothing stayed in there, because that could cause worse tooth issues if you left food to decay.
Sure.
And so you just like rinsed out each thing after you ate for a week, and then it was fine. And so, in all honesty, every time I had my teeth removed, no big deal, even to those extremes. That's just my own personal anecdote for you, Ken.
I really appreciate you sharing that, because that's interesting to hear.
Like I said,
there's 2 other things I'm scared of. One is, I know that going under, there's a risk no matter what that you don't wake up. It's a very low chance, but there is a chance there. So that's always scary.
There's also a chance when you go to sleep each night you won't wake up. But hey,
sure, but that's not being put under by a chemical gas, right? And this is more akin to a coma than it is sleeping. And the second scary thing is what Earth is saying in the chat there. He said they can remove the wisdom teeth and keep you awake if you like, and just numb the area.
That's
I
how
also
mine
want to
work.
be pragmatic here. I'm a logical person, right? And I know fine well that one day in my life I'm going to need to go under. And generally speaking, it's best that I test right now whether I'm allergic to anything and how my body will deal with it. In a kind of minor scenario where I'm just getting some teeth removed, then one day when, who knows, maybe I need to get like a heart bypass or something, and if it turns out I'm allergic, then that could be the end of me, right? So I'd rather test it now when I'm young, fit, and healthy than test it later on in my life when it could be more dangerous. Copy said, when I got my teeth pulled, I was given a child's dose of anesthetic because I would have slept for days if I was given the full amount. Aww. It's very cute.
Copy is a wee woman. Well, Ken, I would say I believe you are psyching yourself out, essentially, that you're overthinking the issue and causing yourself more stress than you should. I think you should take a deep breath and worry about the things you can control, and just accept that this is something you're going to experience, and do so with joy.
Great. I very much look forward to that.
Oh, sir, you'll be fine. Anyhow, so
the
that was one of the
other thing
subjects
I'm
you
scared
had.
of
Yep.
is sorry. The last thing I'll say on the topic. The other thing I'm scared of is waking up, like partly and being kind of drugged and out of it, and maybe saying or doing something that's dumb or dangerous or lying or revealing some long lost secret or something.
Well,
don't
I
know.
can say I have witnessed that happening when ex of mine had gotten wisdom teeth pulled, basically the same kind of procedure. Coming out of anesthesia for her was severe and such that I was there to pick her up. And when she came to, I was right there. And she looked at me and was confused, didn't know who I was, and asked for her mom. It's like, where am I? I need my mom. And it took the dentist, doctors kind of letting her know that, no, it's okay. You do know who this person is. It's okay. But even then, I think it took almost a solid like half hour or so of waking up before she was like okay to travel and good with things again. So you should be fine. It'll be fine. And I do actually really like the recommendation from Hando and the agreement from Earth. It's kind of what I thought as soon as you mentioned dealing with this. I was like, wouldn't it be wonderful? In a sense where we have a medium that we like to share parts of our life with our audience and people who care about us. Wouldn't it be great if you perhaps captured this experience in a vlog type of exercise or something that you could share with all of us? Heck, you could even like real-time stream this if you'd like. If not, you'd be welcome to still record it and we can show it on the show.
Right. So I've had very few experiences with anything mind-altering in my entire life, right? Like, I drink alcohol occasionally, and I'm fine with that usually, and that's fine. Anything else, even like a whiff of somebody else smoking something, makes me go into like mind-altering haze and sadness and deep despair. I cannot. Can you please take my? Can you come here? Can you tell a story? Make sure they stay out. Though.
Yes.
Do you want to tell them out? Do you want to tell them about your time when you were under anesthetic and then came to?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, so I had to get like a filling or something in my tooth sorted. And I remember being in the dentist office and they did the thing and I was like, they're like, okay, count back from 10. I was like, this isn't working. Done. I woke up like a day later with my family just kind of staring at me because apparently I tried to like exit the moving vehicle and also sat on the front lawn in our nice neighborhood in New Jersey and was burbling blood and refusing to come inside. Like my dad had to drag me inside.
Oh no.
There's some other things happened as well. I didn't know how stairs worked. Like it was a good time. It was a good time. Yeah.
Thank you for the story.
You're welcome. Hi guys. Oh, I didn't realize the camera was that way. Bye.
Oh, that's wonderful. See, that just supports. Again, we need video of you coming out, Ken. Because just think if we had
I think that's exactly why we don't need video.
Just think if we had a visual representation of Kitten's experience, how big that would have been. How entertaining that would have been.
No, thank you. No, thank you. All right, sir. That's everything I had to share, and I'm sorry that the discussion part took up like a good 35 minutes of the show at the very start, which means that
totally good. Well, I think it's appropriate as always to talk things tech and things like that, and it's relevant to what's going on now. I absolutely see, every day how people are interacting with technology to get through the times and doing the stuff we're doing, and so I think it was a good conversation from my perspective about some of what's available and some of what people have been doing. So I'm chill with it. I liked it. I did. What was the other one I was going to bring up? So a reminder for anyone who has tuned in and thought or hoped that we were going to be talking to the accidentals today. Mishap there. Didn't lock down the exact times and everything. So we will see if we can't still make that happen in the future. But feel free to keep a watch on our page and theirs to see when that might happen later. Did want to bring that up as we get ready to go to a break. Actually, this is going to be a totally side thing, but something I'm going to do because I've been admittedly trying to prep significantly for them being on today. I've been listening to their music catalog, which I've enjoyed a lot. I do really like their song.
Right.
And so I'm going to play a song that's not one of theirs, but is about a game that has the name of one of their songs. if that makes sense.
Okay, that's very
It's
smart.
one of the songs I've heard a lot from them as I've been watching, because the song they have is called Earthbound from their album Odyssey, which came out 2 years ago. And so we're going to take a break, get ready for more conversation as we come back. And the song I'm going to play is a remix from the game Earthbound called Nocturne for Paula from Sebastian Scaff on OC Remix. So that's what you'll be listening to in the break. We'll be back right after this. If you have any stories about things you've been communicating with, things that might help Ken with his concern about getting oral surgery here in the near future, feel free during the break to use the time to email us in at VtWShowX@gmail.com. I would love to read your stories after the break as we get into a little bit more of what we've been doing past time and some things that are geek this week. So with that, you're watching Show X on Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, Mob Crush, everywhere we can get ourselves out there, and we love having you. So we'll be back right after this in, I should probably check the time range on it. In, what are we at? 3.5 minutes for this song. So, all right, we'll be back right after this, guys. See you in a bit.
You're listening to ShowX on VtWProductions.com.
I'm realizing that we've said it before, but I need to still go in there and take the time to like update the breaks and such coming back, because we're pushing that we're on Twitch, I think is probably our primary that we need to say now. So We'll figure
Yeah,
that out
VtWShowX
as well.
Productions is still there, but
Yeah, it's still still our site and still the thing, still valid, but we want to push people to where they can catch us all the time. So I'm just thinking about that. But anyhow. All right. So it's time to catch up with what we have been doing. Thanks for the discussion in the first half of the show. And so little things to say what's been going on last week. For me, I'll start things off. I did, for those who know or otherwise, celebrate my birthday. And so thank you
happy
for
birthday,
all the well wishes. All the well wishes.
Mr. Adams. Happy birthday to you.
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
So I'm not used to getting the Maryland treatment coming towards me. It's usually me giving.
I know.
Thank
so
you,
one time
Ken.
a year I'll do it.
That works. I appreciate it. All right. So first things first, I think, Ken, you wanted to make an announcement, correct?
Yeah. So sadly we couldn't get the accidentals today. I hope they're okay and such. But we actually have another guest lined up as well. I believe he's okay with me giving his name out and such because he's already kind of out there in the open. This is not some unknown guy. This is so in 2 weeks' time today, we're going to have Dr. David R. White coming on. So Dr. White is a colleague of mine in some respects. He doesn't work at the same place I do. He works in the UK. He's a self-described scientist, researcher, software developer, sometimes filmmaker, guitarist, photographer, and artist.
Nice.
So his main job is working with machine learning at the moment, but last year he did a lot of work with quantum computing in the Department of Physics and Astronomy at the University of Sheffield. So that's super interesting. All of his work's very interesting, his current research and previous. But he came to my previous university a couple of years ago and gave a seminar on quantum computing, what it is. And, you know, it started off with him talking about his research and his part of quantum computing, which was quite niche and specific. But as is to be expected, the audience, which we're all just general computing scientists and mathematicians, started saying, wait, you just said something that sounds like magic. Can you explain the basic concept behind that? And it evolved to a general discussion about quantum physics and such. And Dr. White can provide such fantastic insights into these things. He can describe things in an eloquent way that I understand, which means it's a nice low level, which I very much appreciate. And when I was thinking of people we could possibly interview, I thought, I've met this guy a few times. He's a really nice guy. I've got him on Facebook and stuff. We've gone out for dinner a few times. I'd love to be able to just sit and chat with him for a couple of hours and introduce him to Wayne and to you guys, and we could all ask any questions that are sciencey that are relevant to him, and we could discuss, where things are in his field. We could all learn from him, and we can have an interesting discussion or whatever we feel like. He's also an avid reader, and I don't think he does much in the way of gaming, but I'm sure he watches lots of films and such. So we'll be sure to interview him and just chat with him, and he'll be a great guest to have on the show. And so the cool thing about here on ShowX is that we've always said the X is variable, right? We can talk whatever we please. This week we're going to talk to a band. Last time we talked to a medical student. Next we're hoping to talk to in 2 weeks' time we'll be talking to a quantum researcher and a machine learning researcher now. So fascinating stuff that's interesting, and we can hopefully provide a variety of topics to that we're all generally interested in without going too deep into any particular one. And so let us know what your thoughts are feedback wise, if you like what we're doing with interviews and such, because it takes a bit of effort, but we think it's worth it, and we thoroughly enjoy having people on the show. And it seems like they enjoy it too, and so do you guys. So do let us know what you think. 2 weeks' time, Dr. David White, David R. White, if you're trying to find him. I put his link into the chat there, so you can find his website if you're particularly interested in having a look at what he does. If you really want to see what he does, all his publications are available online as well, so you can actually see the papers that he writes, the scientific papers, and that sort of thing too. All right. Sir, please, I've talked way too much this show, so please tell me, what have you been up to? What's going on in your life?
All right. So I mentioned real quick the happy birthday thing. So thank you everyone for the well wishes. I celebrated in a very chill, relaxed, but great time for my birthday. It was as much as social distancing, so no party to be had, but definitely enjoyed the day. And it was random enough that like middle of the day had like a long nap. And as silly as that may sound, it was
Nice.
wonderful. It was like the perfect weather for it. Door was open, hearing wind outside and such, and just the right temperature. I just found myself like passed out, waking up partially, as well as I had taken the time to make myself a keto-friendly dessert, a variation of one of my family's favorite desserts that I could make low carb. Made that, had far too many helpings, but was quite nice. I think I have one more helping sitting in my fridge that I'll have after the show. And so just really made a day of enjoying it. Played a little bit of League, watched a movie, really just relaxed, and actually spent a good amount of time responding to people who had messaged me on social media wishing me a happy birthday. So thank you everyone for that. Big happiness from that. Other than that, non-geek wise, more trying to be productive and such. I've had 2 projects that I've been working on that I think I've had decent success with. One has been a continuation of my fan wiring project from my trying to bypass the controller on my Hunter brand fan that I have. For those that are aware,
Okay.
the ceiling fan that I have in my bedroom is a Hunter brand, and it has this controller in it, which is too smart for its own darn good. Essentially, they've designed it in a way that you only provide one power wire to it and one ground, and then it splits it into all these darn connections that control the motor, its speed, the lights, their dimness, all of those things happen in here. The challenge with that, while wonderful, is it allows you to control it all through a wireless remote. I want to integrate it into a smart setup in the house so I could just tell a device to turn it on. But to do that, I either need to upgrade this unit to a multi-$100 version that they provide, or I can provide smart switches and such, in which case it just turns the power on and off to the various devices, which I've done through a lot of other lights in the house and works great, including the fan in my living room. Works great. The challenge is because this fan has this controller, you can't control it from wall switches. The wall switches only turn off all the power to the device, or that's it. And so it requires 2 wires coming out into it, one for the lights and one for the fan to be able to control the 2, and this doesn't allow it. So I've been going to many repositories online to try to find out the actual wiring of the fan, and I've learned a bunch. It's not quite fully there yet, but I think I have the right understanding of what I have to bypass on this controller to get it to do what I want it to. Essentially, I'm going to take this out of the loop completely, hardwire in the fan motor and the lights, but I have to add a capacitor to the middle of this so that the motor for the fan can continue. I can either pull one out of here, but I think that'd be too much sacrifice, or I can get a different one, which will probably be what I do. But I've been working on that fan project for far too long, but I think I have a step forward for that. The other thing I've been doing, this is, Wayne's social distancing time frame, is I actually got access to my friend Laser Lemon's like household fan that she has because she uses it for white noise as she sleeps and stuff. And it had been rattling really awful, just like this kind of sound to it. And I pulled it apart. She'd already worked on it and found that she could like do a little bit of WD-40, which would minimize it to some degree for a little while, but not actually fix it. So I pulled the whole thing apart and started playing with it. And first attempt, as I took it apart, I actually made it worse, as happens when you learn things. Because you know how a lot of basic fans, they have their motor control and stuff like that, but they also can oscillate. You usually pop a little thing and the whole thing will go back and forth as it's blowing. I have since learned exactly how that whole mechanism works. Kind of cool. But in doing so, to learn the process, I pulled it apart. And when I did, the piece that you pop down or up to turn on and engage the gears for oscillation have the little bearings inside of it with some springs that cause it to either hold itself connected or to allow itself to spin freely. And the first time I disassembled it, when I was trying to figure out other things I could do to fix the rattle, one of the bearings like took itself out and went under the gear, so I couldn't see it. So when trying to put it back together, it was missing one of those little bearings, and the spring wouldn't compress properly. And so basically it would no longer oscillate. It couldn't engage the gear. So I had to pull it all apart again and find that. So I was like, oh, this is why that isn't working. But in the process, I also used some slight engineering. I used some 3D printing and measuring to find ways to minimize the rattle. Because what I found was that the main shaft of the motor actually would pull back a little bit, and in doing so, it gave itself some room and would start to rattle in its casing. And that was a challenge because it actually was pushed back by the fan. So as the fan rotated, it would push itself back to push the air out and cause that rattle. It's like, So I ended up designing and printing a small nylon insert that I could put around a piece to hold the motor thing forward a little bit. That helped some. Still had a little bit because I didn't get the tolerance perfect. As well as there was a little bit of the screw that comes behind the motor and gears that engage how the oscillation works that had a little bit of play in it as well. So I printed another nylon nub. And the reason I use nylon is because it has a natural kind of lubrication to it. It actually is a surface, or that plastic kind of the feel of nylon allows itself to slip against other materials. And I printed a little nub to fit and push forward the gear as well. So the two of those together helped. Still a little bit of rattle, but helped. And then I went in there, and where it had naturally a bit of, I guess, grease to kind of work with the gears and everything, I went and grabbed what I use for automotive work, and actually my general grease around anything, any application, which is wheel bearing grease. It's grease that is sturdy enough that you actually pack the bearings in for your automotive, for your car wheels, into the axle. And so it's really good grease. Thick grease. I used a bunch of that and put it like all around all those things that touched the nylon pieces I put in. I filled the gearbox and stuff with that and did all that together, reassembled it. And I'd like to, I'm proud to say it basically fixed it. There's still like the lightest bit of rattle, but once it speeds up, it pretty much goes away. So I was really happy that I was able to engineer a solution to what I want to say, extend the life of, essentially just a fairly inexpensive, house fan, but it was a fun learning project for me as I had time on hand.
That's neat. And plus, it's all, you're extending the life of it, but it's also part of your, smart automation of the home stuff as well. So it's part of a bigger project too.
All the things I can do where I can, this is my nature, very much the do-it-myself and hands-on kind of handy person that I like to believe I can be, is that if a project comes forth that is not beyond my capability, I will more likely defer to taking the time to figure out how to do it myself, get the appropriate tools, and spend the time to fix or do the project myself as I can, then outsource it to someone else who's going to be better at it. I do a bit of the cost versus time calculation. Is it better for me to just pay someone who will do it right the first time? Or can I fumble through this without it being too much of an issue and learn something in the process? And I do value my learning fairly high. So I am willing to take on a bit of cost and a pretty significant time reduction of having whatever it is I'm after, because I get to learn something in the process. That's part of my nature. But those are two projects I've been doing that I've had a ton of fun with that haven't been, I'd say, as geeky this week. So that's kind of what I've been doing. How about yourself, sir? Anything you've been doing beyond the quiz and what you know with Dennis that hasn't been geeky before we transition over?
Yeah, a fair bit. So this is where I've been spending more of my time. So first of all, I should probably mention that I had a chat with Kitten last night about my gaming and how much gaming I do and such. Because, to be frank, I feel like with the self-isolation, I've been having a good time, but I've been squirreling myself away playing video games and chilling out a bit too much.
What?
I found myself, well, whereas before I would like come home from work and maybe do some extra couple of hours work and maybe do some other stuff. I found myself now, when it hits 5 exactly, I close everything and move into gaming mode and I go play Fortnite or something. And I'm like, this isn't very good. Like, and plus I don't even do it socially. I just go and do solo games, and I don't think that's very. I think games are a good reward, but I don't think it should be, all I do. I have a lot of hobbies that I love and enjoy, and I've been ignoring them for some reason because I feel like I have to because of this isolation. But it's not true. I think I've been deluding myself into this strange symptom of the pandemic, is that I feel like I just need to game in my spare time because I should enjoy it, and that's all I can do. But that's not the case. So last night we had this discussion about this, and I decided I was going to. We're both actually going to be doing this. We're going to try a week without gaming. So, except for social gaming.
So madman.
If there's a scheduled event with people that we're hanging out with, and we game, that's fine. That's acceptable. That's okay. And then that's still fun. But it's also social, and that's important, right? However, when it comes to like me just, I should probably do X, Y, and Z, but instead I'm going to play League of Legends. I'm not going to do that anymore. That's not going to be a thing. So me and a few guys from Scotland have had Fortnite Thursdays for a while.
Oh, nice.
We have a group of about 6 or 7 of us that jump on and play Fortnite. And I'm going to continue doing that because that's a social event. That's important. On Fridays, I play Factorio with some of my colleagues, but that's actually kind of work anyway. Plus, it's social, so I do that. So I'm going to continue doing those. And same with if yourself, if Hando, if Copy, whoever want to do something, and they're like, "Hey, do you want to hang out on Tuesday and do this?" If I'm free, I'll say yes, and I'll hang out and play games then. But otherwise, I'm going to focus on doing other stuff, such as watching films, reading, photography. And if we get the next stimulus check, I'm probably going to purchase a cheap guitar and get back to doing some guitar because I really miss it. Really miss it. So that was kind of the one of my first talking points. I thought that was kind of interesting. And see how that goes. An interesting experiment. Because I think everybody agrees that gaming is fun. We all enjoy it. Our community is based on it. But life is not just gaming, right? And I think I've been getting a little sad by just doing that. And I don't want to be sad doing something I enjoy, right? I want it to be something I actually enjoy. So I also started watching some stuff I've been wanting to watch for a long while. This weekend I started watching Star Wars. So I've still not seen Solo, and I will eventually get to it.
Okay.
But right now, all I've seen so far is what was the first the trilogy called? I can't remember what that one was called.
Oh gosh, actual names of them each.
Star Wars films.
So you had Rise of Skywalker. You had, oh shoot, that's wrong. I should know this off the top of my head.
I shouldn't. So the Rogue One. So Rogue One I hadn't seen. Right.
That's not the first of the trilogy. That's
not true. Yeah, I had seen that. Force Awakens.
Yeah.
So I'd seen Force Awakens and I'd seen Rogue One, but I hadn't seen Last Jedi nor Rise of Skywalker.
Okay.
And I've not seen Solo either. So I watched Last Jedi yesterday, and today I started watching Rise of Skywalker. I'm about a third of the way through it right now.
Okay.
Because I got the week free of Disney Plus, so I'm making the most of it.
Ah, smart man.
Yeah. So so here's my true thoughts on it without being burdened by looking at critic reviews and what people think yet.
That's
I don't know anything about the films at all. So these are just my viewpoints, all right?
Gotcha.
So Force Awakens I thought was okay. I didn't really... I felt the characters were sort of hastily introduced and not given enough story. This was back when I watched it in 2015 as well, but it was fine. It was fine. I enjoyed it, and it was okay. Last Jedi, which I watched yesterday, I thought that was quite good. However, it was the same problem. It made the assumption that I care about the characters, and I don't yet. I don't feel anything. I don't really care about them. So when it makes allusions to some of them dying, possibly, maybe, or whatever, I'm just sort of like, okay, that's fine. I felt like some of the stuff that they introduced in terms of force powers and things that can be done was a little annoying. I feel like before the force was kind of a mysterious thing that wasn't, I don't know, it wasn't this extremely powerful thing. It was more like it's a thing that it was a plot point more than anything. It was a soft magic system, right? It wasn't properly defined, excluding 1, 2, and 3, which I'm not going to talk about. But in 4, 5, and 6, it was sort of this magical thing that was convenient at certain plot points, but it wasn't the solve all, right? It was just part of the story, and I liked that. I feel like in this current trilogy, it feels more like it's this vast, powerful, hard magic system that's explained more, and it kind of irritates me. And I feel like instead of the sort of hinted at behavior of the Force and the balance of the Force in 4, 5, and 6, and somewhat 1, 2, and 3, it's more definitive. I don't really like the fact they're like, oh, well, it's really just a numbers game of how many Jedi versus how many Sith. That's kind of irritating. I don't feel like it should be like that. I did very much like the end of The Last Jedi. I don't know if this is a spoiler because it's 3 years old now. But I suppose it's not really a spoiler because it's not even mentioned, I don't think. But at the end of The Last Jedi, you see this kid watching the stars, and he's just some slave kid that's not a part of any important bloodline or anything. Because so far in Star Wars, it's all been about bloodlines, right? If you're the son of a Skywalker, or the daughter of a Skywalker, you're magic Jedi power, right? This random kid Force pushes a broom just slightly, just a little bit, just moves it, and I was like, whoa. That's interesting. That's pretty cool. And I kind of like this. I've always thought that in the Star Wars universe, the Force shouldn't be based on bloodlines. I feel like this whole... I don't really like that trope in fantasy that it's all bloodline based, because it's a callback to this unnecessary mindset of royal bloodlines. Like, just because you're born from somebody, it doesn't make it destiny. That just means that's just a weird form of luck. I'd rather it just be true luck, and that, you know, if you can control the Force, you have it or you don't, and it's not genetically based. I think that's more interesting, and it provides better stories as well. That way, you don't have to just work out you can't just follow it through the bloodline and that's it. You know, it could turn out that somebody in the storyline has some magic potential, and that's interesting. That's more fun. So that was really interesting, and I thought it was pretty cool. I'd say I enjoyed the film overall. I was so with Rey. I thought she was an interesting new Jedi, but again, yeah, she did have a bit too much power for somebody who hadn't trained at all. A little irritating. A bit of a Mary Sue, it felt like, and she's also super good with tech. I was like, okay, she can kind of do a lot of stuff here. Now I'm a third of the way through The Rise of Skywalker, and I'm really pleased with this part of it. I like the fact that they have muddled the lines between Sith and Jedi entirely. It seems to no longer be you're good or bad. It seems to be more of this gray Jedi type thing. And I loved that in the extended universe when you had the gray Jedi who could, you know, you use dark power and the good power and you mix and match for whatever your goal was. I prefer that approach to it rather than the paladin warlock viewpoint, right? I think that's more interesting. And maybe if eventually they have to choose a path or something, that's fine. But I like the fact that they can walk the middle as well. That's fascinating. I think in any story, it's rather dull if it's you know, good and bad, you know, good and evil. It's much more interesting if it's shades of grey. What I really didn't like, and this is no spoiler because in every cinematic trailer that I've seen as well, I'm not sure why they brought back Palpatine. That was a bit unnecessary. I think that you could have continued that without that whole part of the story so far. I mean, they've only seen a third of the film, but that was a bit weird to me. I don't know how I feel about that. I'm going to watch the rest of it and see. So far, again, same as before, I feel like they're trying to, one, pander to the historic elements of Star Wars more than they should. They're like, oh, you remember this character? You care about them because they used to be in the old films a bit much. And the new characters, they're like, oh, you care about them just as much as the old characters. When I don't. Like, both those kind of contrary points are true, right? And that's what's annoying. Okay, so that's all the stuff Star Wars. I'll watch the rest of it and see, and I'll comment more next week about my thoughts on it. Sir, have you?
Oh, you hiccuped right as you finished that statement. You said, "Sir, have I what?" Ask the question again.
Oh, I must cough. Have you seen the rest of that? Have you seen that whole trilogy, the new trilogy?
I have seen all of the Star Wars movies.
And what are your general thoughts on it? Just to remind,
we do not have time
before,
to even touch on it today. I had commented in the comments. We don't have time next week to talk about it. If we want to do a discussion about Star Wars, Ken, we'll have to do a one-off show that is strictly about that. That could take us as long as a rantathon, because I has thoughts, so many thoughts, and I did my best while you were talking just to smile and not say a thing and message a few things about the fact that I have lots of thoughts and feelings. And
okay,
I am happy to do it. Like, I am very happy to do it, but I felt like I would have completely derailed you if I started.
That's fine.
And so I want you to finish.
You letting me finish. Yeah,
I want you to finish. I want you to watch Solo as well. Make sure you've seen them all. And then I think it would be worthwhile either as us to do our ShowX, but to schedule it with a potential buffer of more time, but to let people know ahead of time in case they want to avoid spoilers and stuff, because I will happily go at length about my thoughts about the Star Wars series. Happily.
Okay.
Like,
okay, we will save that for a special
I have to stop myself when others bring it up sometimes, and I'm just like, oh, I feel myself on the soapbox. Do I get into this?
You have more willpower than I, because when I see the soapbox, I jump on it. I can't help it.
I normally do.
I think that's probably why we have the podcast, right? Because we're both really... Yeah. We can do that. We just see something we want to talk about. We can't shut up.
That is something I would love to talk about, but we need to like warn people / advertise for people that that's about to happen. I'm willing to have the full-on fight, debate. Hando and I have had fights. Lots of people and I have had discussions about the validity or value of the various movies throughout the series. So I am happy to have that discussion. All right. I will let that go. I'm letting that simmer
Okay.
down.
Thank you. So, moving away from Star Wars, I picked up Luminar. Luminar is a piece of software which I had trialed before. So I've used Adobe Lightroom. I have used Darktable. I have used Raw Therapy with 2 E's at the end, which I quite
Okay.
liked. And I've used Luminar, and I've used Photomatic. And I've also used Snapseed on Android, which I very much like and still use. But of all the different software I've tried for editing photos, they all have their own strengths and weaknesses. I think Lightroom is very good. I really like Lightroom. It ain't worth the price though. It's just I don't put enough time into that hobby to spend that much money per month, sadly.
Yeah,
Even
no,
though I
that's
would love to do that. And if I had more time for photography, I would absolutely spend the money on Lightroom and the monthly fee. But right now, it ain't worth it. I'm not going to spend like £100, like $150 a year on software that I use for a total of maybe 4 or 5 hours a year. Like, that's dumb.
so Ken, just as a heads up, this is another one we should have a one-off discussion, like comment on, where I can bring on several of our photographer people and such.
I would love it if we had a photography show like hardcore. Like we should make that a special episode sometime.
Well, this specific conversation we should definitely bring up, but please continue.
Sure. So Luminar, I have some ups and downs of Luminar. Basically, I'll see what I dislike about it first because there's fewer of those. I dislike the fact that it is very heavily bent on being slightly more Photoshop than being Lightroom. It's more about adding stuff to the photo that isn't there than it is about editing what is there.
Okay.
However, there's a lot of stuff in there that you can do that's tweaking rather than editing, right? I've always said that for me the distinction is a photo manipulation and photography. Photography, you're allowed to edit. You're allowed to change the contrast, the saturation, the brightness, add a vignette. You're allowed to do all that sort of stuff. You can even do some tonal stuff. I think when you start adding something that wasn't originally in the photo, that's when it becomes photo manipulation. And that's fine. Photo manipulation is a very important art form and it should exist. Not what I'm into, not what I personally enjoy. I don't call that photography. That's photo manipulation. It's its own standalone beast as far as I'm concerned. It's perfectly reasonable in certain circumstances, and it's perfectly okay thing in general. For me, I would only ever consider doing it if, say, for example, I was doing wedding photography and I screwed up an important moment, like the groom and the bride kissing, because there was a big dot in the middle of the camera lens or something. And if I can Photoshop it out, I'll do it because that it's not about my own personal preference of category of the art form. It's about the end product, and that's more important. But when it comes to my own personal photography, I do not really want to add stuff that's artificial. I feel like that is taking away from the original art form, which is photography for me. Other people can do what they want. I've seen a lot of beautiful work that's done in Photoshop, and I thoroughly enjoy it, but I wouldn't call it photography necessarily. I'd call it photo manipulation. Okay, so Luminar kind of toes that line. So I've played with their photo manipulation tools that they have in it. For example, you can add an artificial sun to the backdrop and then add rays from that sun. It looks cool, and it fits in quite nicely. They have a lot of interesting artificial intelligence mechanisms in the software that you can play with. For example, augment the sky. So you can add lightning, for example, or you can add, like I said, sun rays. You can add clouds. You can actually completely replace the sky. So it will analyze where it thinks the sky is in the photo and replace it with a different photo, either the one that's from their template gallery or one that you have put to the side yourself. So you can, put together a couple of photos into one, which is perfectly fine. I don't have a problem with this. But again, I feel like if you don't contextualize it when you upload this somewhere as saying, by the way, this is an edit, I think that's kind of lying to people, right? So I think it's really neat and it's really useful for that, but that's not why I enjoy about it. So the pros, what I really like about it is, one, it's a one-off purchase. That is freaking amazing in today's day and age of Lightroom monthly payments. Admittedly, you're stuck with the single version, right? So if they come out with a new version next year, you don't get it. Whatever, I'm very happy with this. And to be honest, I don't see why I'd want to move away from this for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. I've spent the money on it, and that's fine. What's also really nice, they have a payment plan system with 0% interest. So I think it's something like $80 or something for the software, for the basic version of it. I'm paying that over 3 months. I could pay it outright. But if I can pay over 3 months, why wouldn't I? And that way, I've still got the license forever. I like that. I can also put the license on 2 different computers. That's really nice. So I've got one on my work computer and on my Windows laptop over there. That's great. The tools in it to do the noise reduction and sharpening and such, really beautiful. There's a lot of artificial intelligence based stuff. Like you can, it says AI structure is one of the tweaks that you can do, kind of like one of the bars you can move around, which basically it analyzes the photo and works with sharpness and such to try and make it look good. But generally speaking, it's not always right. So you still need to kind of like tweak it yourself on top of that. But it's nice to be able to see what it will provide. There's a whole bunch of templates available as well of like different edit platforms, same with what Lightroom provides. So for example, you want to do something that looks like a beautiful summer's day garden look. It might bump up the saturation and maybe, I don't know, put down the vignette or something, whatever. It will do all that automatically and you can see what it looks like and then you can edit on top. It has all that as well. As far as I'm concerned, it's pretty much as good as Lightroom. It's got a great cataloging system. The only thing I dislike is the temptation to use all the other creative tools, which I think are over the top in my opinion. And it makes me want to delegitimize some of my own photos, which is a little bad. But I recommend it. It's a really pretty bit of software. It runs nicely, and it's really intuitive to use. It's really not difficult. Unlike, for example, raw therapy.
Does it use destructive or non-destructive editing?
I know that the export is you can choose the export type, and I believe you can choose 100% quality of as JPEG, but that's still going to be
no. But I mean, in the edit process,
quality.
During the edit process, does it do everything as a? The difference, like with Photoshop programs, they do non-destructive editing, where you can do especially Lightroom, you can do a chain of things that you do to the photo that are really just calculations, and until you save it out, it has not touched the file.
And then, you can do that. There's also a layering system that you can use on top to double ensure that I'm effectively. But yeah, it does. Yeah,
because there are a few programs or processes out there that their way of doing the photo manipulation is destructive, which in today's day and age is kind of surprising that there's still destructive processes out there. Most things have found ways to do it all in memory or do it in steps in such a way that it's all non-destructive, such that the beauty of non-destructive editing is that you can actually you can change steps that happened prior and keep all the steps you did later, because now it just takes that out of the editing chain and it still allows it to maintain the rest of the process you've done. It's a really big deal in lots of different editing software. I was just curious how as a whole, because I remember watching, I think, a Linus Tech Tip recently where he was talking about, could he get away from using, if you want to look it up, Linus has one that says like, I spend $10,000 a year on Adobe licensing for his business. And could they get away from that by using some free programs or one-time purchase programs and such?
They can, but it just won't be as nice.
Well, so in that discussion, one of the things he talked about, one of the tools they tried to use, he found one that used destructive, and he even then was caught off guard. Like, people still do that? What the heck? But you're giving me tons of ideas, Ken, because for me, at least, my own interests and knowing some of the members of the audience, I feel like we need to have, these focused shows, like a whole Star Wars show, a whole photo editing show with both theory and tool discussion and things like that. As I don't know if you saw in the messaging there how Earthweaver said Own One is a phone program to use for tool or photo editing, and Laser Lemon responding to you, I believe, about the discussion of photography in its pure sense versus creative ways of editing and manipulating imagery. And she said, amen, I believe, to your statement on your thought on that level, if I read that right. And so I feel like amongst the photography world, there's a lot of also opinion and feels about those various subjects, and I'd love to get into depth on those.
Absolutely. And we should definitely have a photography episode and as well as a post-processing episode. I'd like to talk about gear as well, which is another part of the thing I had mentioned here. I really want to get a new camera. My 60D, I love it. It's done so much for me, but man, I feel like I've grown past it. I want to take a photo that is so sharp, that has such detail that is sickening. I want a full frame, mirrorless Canon R type that just, when I take a portrait of somebody and I use the right settings, it just looks like you can just keep zooming in. I want that crisp detail. I mean, my camera is great. I think it's got 22 meg picture quality. It's like 5,000 by 4,000 resolution or something, which is really nice. But still, it doesn't capture all the quality that I really want. There's nothing to do with the lens and nothing to do with the settings I'm using. It's nothing to do with using a tripod. It's to do with the fact that the base camera can only go so far. I really want to replace that. But I'm looking at the price for these things, and I'm like, man, this is going to be like something I get when I'm like 40.
This is another one of these discussions. I will tell you, I understand those feelings. I've had some philosophical discussions recently about that. I do always look at what's new in tech. That is one of my loves in life. And I will say that if I were given the opportunity to buy a camera today based on what exists, I would have easily jumped on the new, was it the Sony 7 Mark IV or whatever, 7R Mark IV or whatever that version of the Sony mirrorless is. That looks so amazing. But at the same time, I keep watching what's coming, and Canon's announcement of that EOS R5, even though it's not available yet, but their tease on it sounds amazing. Things like a new image sensor and processor, finally adding in-body stabilization, up to 12 frames per second with the mechanical shutter and 20 frames per second on silent, 8K raw video shooting and 4K at 120p, having dual card slots, all of that. Yeah. I am a sucker for looking at some of the tech that's coming. So I feel you.
Canon 60. The 60D came out in 2010. It's 10 years old now. It doesn't even have like the most simple, like it has HD recording, which I think was probably really big at the time, because it's like 1080p, which is nice. Even though the resolution they can take with photos is way higher. And it's 18.1 megapixels. Sorry, I didn't even beat the 20 mark. And it's a beautiful camera. It really is. And I love the little flip screen. That is so damn useful, like surprisingly so. But man, I'm just so ready to move on. I also want to get one of those battery grips so I can turn my camera and get the extra battery life as well.
Those are lovely.
I want that. Yeah. Anyway, so aside from that, we can talk about that forever. I wanted to give a shout out to Duolingo, which I've still been doing. I did a whole
Yes, you have, you bastard. I'll never catch up to your score.
You're so competitive. I'm not even like trying to beat you here.
I mean, good job, sir.
It's being annoying. So Duolingo has this nice feature where this thing called stories, which basically instead of you, it's not letting me leave. I don't want to learn anything else. Why is it trying to force me to click on something? It seems to have forgotten who I am. Whatever. When you click on the stories mode, instead of just doing lessons where it's like, here's a sentence, fill in the gaps, or match these words, the stories are actually, like a 10, 15 line story, which has a bunch of new vocabulary, some new grammar, and it has a lot more words that I find are more useful in day-to-day use. For example, I learned the word for thing, which is something I was never taught in 4 years of German, the word thing. So useful in daily language for English. But it's something in German you'd rather teach your students to name the thing rather than the word thing.
Than to use a generic thing.
I think that's why. And there's a lot of words like that. So a big shout. When I discovered that feature, I went and did 4 stories straight away, and I was like kind of engulfed in it. I was like, this is so cool. I love this. I've been really enjoying that. And the last thing I want to mention, sorry, I'm taking a lot of time here, is I've been weirdly enthralled with woodworking for the past few days.
Woodworking's a wonderful skill.
It's something I've never really done. Like I did it like once in high school for like 2 minutes, and that was it. But I really I've been thinking about it, and I think it's just such a neat thing to do. And I follow the woodworking subreddit and see all the beautiful stuff they make. And I was thinking, man, I would be so proud to have like my own desk that was like nicely finished, polished and nice fancy wood, something that would normally cost like thousands of dollars, but that I made by hand. I love that idea. And I think that's just a cool thing to do. Plus, there's a lot of projects you can do that are fairly simple, like making a chopping board, which is just making a block
very
of wood,
straightforward,
right? But it means something to you. Then you're like, oh, I made that. That's like now a family heirloom, and you can make a nice one. One that's properly finished. I'd love to do something like that. So I've been thinking about how to get into this, but either means I'd have to buy my own entire woodworking, shop effectively, which is, a very expensive hobby, or go to one of these maker spaces and try stuff out there. But then that's got its own issues as well, especially right now. But it's just something I wanted to talk about because I thought it was just an interesting hobby that I'd love to get into one day. Not enough time on Earth, right, for all these hobbies.
Never enough
So
time for all the hobbies, even when we're on quarantine or
yeah,
socially
exactly.
distanced. Even when I haven't had to go to work for over a month, there's still not enough time for all the hobbies I have.
Nice. So, sir, that's me done with my geek.
Okay, nice. Well, and on that note, I will say that I will see how things change for me because I do get to start going to work apparently tomorrow. So
Yeah.
that'll be an interesting transition back. I actually realized today my biggest thing that I'm going to struggle with is remembering passwords. Because, you're not allowed to write passwords down and do all these other nice, important things. And so when you haven't actually used a password for months and you have many different passwords, we'll see how well that knowledge has atrophied in my brain, or if I spend half of my day trying to remember passwords before getting locked out and then having to wait, for unlock processes.
I hate that, man.
I actually have a big concern about that when I get back to work. Is I at least think I remembered my passcodes to get into my workspace. So that's step one. And also,
Well,
you say that about
you won't be the only one.
you say that about the camera thing. My 7D came out in what, 2009 was when it was released. So I understand, man. I understand. All right,
Well,
so
old cameras are still good. I mean, both our cameras are good.
I still use my 20D, which came out in what, 2002 or 3, as a secondary camera, and it's been surprising how well that thing has held up. So be aware. Actually, Schmitty, one of the things they did say is that they are relaxed all of the locked setups and things that we should be able to get in, that they negated the locks because everybody was out, that they gave everyone like a grace period of additional time on the accounts. We'll see. I'll be very curious. All right, the things that I was going to talk about that are a little bit more geek this week. Breeze through mine here. So one of the big ones, I did finish finally Wind Waker, the Legend of Zelda Wind Waker HD.
Hey, well
Finished
done.
it on stream. You're welcome to go check it out and see my last couple playthrough attempts on that. Finally caught up, did the end bosses, the last battles. I liked it. I liked the cadence they gave in it of having to kind of revisit all of the previous fights. There was in order to get one of the final pieces you needed to open up the castle and Hyrule and everything, was a boss fight where you went through like 50 levels of fights against regular creatures in the game. And that was, I thought, really well played, really well done. And then towards the end of actual beating the castle and getting in to fight Ganon, you had to go against some of the epic temple bosses from which, and I have to admit, the first one I went against, I completely forgot the mechanic of how you beat them and went through a whole round of getting my rear end stomped before I remembered or realized or saw whatever it was, like, oh yeah, that's the thing you have to do. I did this completely back asswards. And so, but I enjoyed how it finished out, the story through and everything. And in doing so, now I have transitioned and have just started playing the next one in the series. So I started Twilight Princess, which is a completely different feel. That one came out, 2006? And I got the HD remix or whatever on the Wii U that I'm playing that one. And such a different way of just entering the game, and from the cartooniness that was Wind Waker to now a much more realistic view, if you can get that with a Zelda game, of Link and everyone, and following on the storyline essentially from the throwback from Ocarina of Time, where this would be the storyline if Link went back to try to prevent Ganon's rise in the first place, as it continues in the convoluted storyline that is all things Zelda. But it is really pretty, maintains some of those best mechanics of the gameplay that Wind Waker had, so I like that. And already I'm enjoying the story it's going. It's a lot darker and a lot more intensive actual storyline. And my introduction to the character that so many people have talked to me about over the years of Midna, the Twilight Princess, or at least Midna itself. I'm still not sure her exact role other than where she's at in it. And as Link gets transformed from a traditional character into what he is through the game, is really neat to me. And I'm liking the animation, I'm liking the story, I like the snark or kind of attitude that Midna has. But I will say I'm also a little bit, I was not expecting, had never seen that apparently Midna's hair is actually one of the grabber creatures, or very similar to, from Wind Waker. I forget what those are called. But that freaked me out actually playing the game initially when I was running under or something that she reacted to, and her hair kind of went from just being hair to this like arm sitting on top of her head. I was like, what the heck is that? And thought I was going to have to
That's
fight
terrifying,
it in
yep.
some way. Yeah, that caught me off guard. But otherwise, I'm really much enjoying that. Other than that, geek-wise, been playing still League of Legends as always, ARAMs. They introduced a new little base mechanic. I don't know if it exists elsewhere in the game. It's at least in the ARAM map of Volibear. And there's an event that says the storm is coming. I've had the opportunity now to share that event with like 3 or 4 people in their first times. It's kind of random, doesn't happen every match, but you'll know if you're in an ARAM that it will happen if it says a storm is coming. And then eventually partway through the objective on the right will say like storm is nearing or very close. I don't know the timing of that all, but when it happens, this large ghost version of Volibear shows up in the middle of the lane off to the side of the map and kind of comes in and actually does affect the gameplay for a moment by pounding the ground, and it pops everybody up on the map for a moment. I'm trying to think kind of like who's attacked, but basically a big pop-up. And while normally it happens in such a way that it's kind of just a neat graphical moment in the game, I did actually have it cause a gameplay element. It got me a kill. I was playing as Morgana, and as we were fighting still on their side of the first tower, right as it happened, I had snared someone right at the edge of their tower and dropped the pool under it, and they were low enough health they were going to run out and likely would have run out of the pool. But right as I snagged it in the pool underneath, Volibear came in and pounded so that the person stayed in the same place, and I think it continued to tick the damage from her pool and killed him before he was able to run out of the pool. And so that actually made me smile a little bit. Like, hey, thank you, Volley. You actually got me a kill. And so I think that was awesome. Let's see. Other than that, I think that's all I've really done that's been geek this week. What else was there? Yeah, I was going to say, as far as I see, the stream's still running. Oh, man. Okay. I had a discussion point I could bring up. I actually had a few things I could.
Yeah, please do.
There was one in particular I saw just recently about Riot's new game, Vanguard. I don't know if you followed or seen anything on this, Ken.
Nope.
Okay, so they have a new, I guess I would have initially said it was like a version of a game similar to an Overwatch or something like that. I've heard it described in a few different ways for the game style it is, but it's essentially an FPS style game that Riot has made. There's a long convoluted, actually that link may not work directly. I think it pulled off in a weird way, but hopefully you guys are able to pull that link. I see a lot of extra stuff in there. But from PC Gamer, they have an article talking about this new game, Vanguard. And the big controversy about it, though, is their anti-cheat software. They're trying to be very aggressive by ensuring people can't cheat in this game. So, as the article says, it says, much of the talk about Riot's new shooter Valorant has been about the anti-cheat software package with it called Vanguard. The name is appropriate because Vanguard doesn't just sniff around for cheats when Valorant is running. It starts up with Windows and proactively blocks users from running certain programs, whether or not they're playing Valorant at the time. It says Vanguard is unusually intrusive for anti-cheat software, though contrary to some of the more imaginative theories you can read online, the reason for that is not a Pinky-in-the-Brain-esque scheme to blow up everyone's PC and take over the world. The software Vanguard uses drivers that at least allegedly contains vulnerabilities that could be exploited by cheat makers. For those who don't happen to use any of that software, installing Vanguard won't do much. For others, it will block software they likely are using or even software they rely on, such as specific CPU temperature monitoring programs. That's certainly not ideal, and in a few cases, it's really bad news. All right, so the big part of it, and from you, Ken, you might understand some of the concerns. There's two parts of it. One is a kernel mode driver that runs the PC boots up, and two, a client that checks to make sure you aren't running any cheats while you're playing Valorant. The kernel mode driver is the client's bodyguard, basically. It doesn't collect data about your PC or send anything to Riot. It looks at other drivers and blocks them from running if it detects that they have a known vulnerability that could be used to compromise the anti-cheat client. It says if Vanguard's driver isn't started with Windows, Valorant won't trust your PC and it won't let you play online. So what do you think about this in general, Ken? Of
Okay.
someone doing an anti-cheat software that is essentially a root level to the, or kernel level access to your OS?
I think there's multiple viewpoints on this. First of all, the ethical one. If you're installing anti-cheat software on somebody's machine, it's a kind of spyware no matter what, right? It's going to be watching something on your machine, and that's a bit dodgy. People are always a bit uncertain about that, and that's not necessarily good from a capitalistic viewpoint from them making money. People are not going to want to buy this game if there's something in it that's going to be watching their computer, or at least less people will.
Well, I was
Right?
going to say, a lot of online games, if not most, have some level of anti-cheat software attached to them, be it the classic
They do.
Punk Buster or something other. And it's in their terms of service. You agree to it when you start playing their game online, when you install it. But so that's one piece of just a discussion about it. I think
The vast majority of software out there, if it's online based, has server based checks. So, for example, in League of Legends, there is some software on your machine, but one of the things they have on their server is they watch for people's response times, and they look for patterns. So, generally speaking, when you have something that's automatically clicking for you or automatically pressing buttons for you, it's either ridiculously quick or it'll follow some certain pattern that's easy to track and work out. So, for example, if you RuneScape actually was one of the original big problems with this, is that people would set up auto hotkey, which was a script that would you train it. So you do something with your mouse or your keyboard, like a repetitive task in the game, and once you've done a single loop of doing the same thing over and over again once, you hit record, done, save, go, and then RuneScape will just check the timing in between. So eventually, this scripting program allowed you to introduce randomized time differences. But then RuneScape just started looking for a randomized key seed, and if they can track it as being truly random, then it's probably not human either, right? Humans tend to stick to a general couple seconds lag and be kind of within that. Additionally, they checked where on the screen you're clicking. So if you're clicking on the exact same pixel, even twice in a row, that's pretty unlikely. And if you after moving your mouse, that's pretty unlikely. If you do it like 10 times in a row, it's astronomically unlikely. Nobody has that good of vision, right, or the ability or precision with a mouse. So there's a lot of ways to track that those kind of issues. Additionally, if you have incredibly good accuracy in a game and you always get headshots, the very second that your computer receives the network information of where a player is, that's another way of tracking when somebody's clearly cheating, right? There's a whole bunch, like Valve has its own software that is based on that kind of premise, where it's not necessarily something on your machine, it's server-based, and it looks for how you interact with the game. Generally speaking, it's the same mechanism actually as Google's reCAPTCHA, right? It's based on some suppositions of how humans interact with software, how quick you are, and so basically your lack of accuracy and the way your timing of how you do stuff is a good way of working out whether you're human or not, and it works very well, very high chance of working. There are some software out there that can get past this stuff by being either very smart or just being kind of inefficient, which makes it more human-like, and having some randomized or noisy elements to it. But in the end, you can't stop it all. If you have software locally on the machine, you can't. There are ways of tracking and checking these things, but as always, I mean, what's to really stop somebody from programming a robot hand to use the mouse, right?
Well,
so even if they have software running on the machine that checks the drivers and such, if you've got a robot mouse and a camera connected to a different machine controlling the game, how can they possibly stop you? There's always ways around this, and it kind of reminds me of back in the day with DRM, digital rights management stuff, on
that stuff
games.
is so bad. Yep.
I know that I personally, and I think most gamers are of this opinion, they're way more likely to play a game if it doesn't have a DRM, or if a DRM is so lax that you don't notice it, like Steam, right? That's usually when it's fine. And I think that they should follow the same approach for cheating, where they should have it server-based entirely. In fact, Xbox used to have another famous one, and so did PlayStation, I imagine, of checking for lag switches. So if you're playing Halo or Call of Duty, what you can do is build a little device in your Ethernet, so the actual wire that connects to your Xbox, which has the internet going through it, right? The internet packets.
Yep. Man in the middle attacks, essentially. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And you have this little bit of hardware which you can make quite easily yourself, which is basically a button or a switch that you click or press or whatever, and it disconnects and reconnects fairly quickly, like maybe half a second, 1 second, 2 seconds, whatever. And so if you're trying to like cheat in the game, what you do is you press this switch, you run over to where the guy is standing perfectly still, you shoot them until they die on your machine, you reconnect it, your machine sends the package over to the server that says, "Yep, I killed the guy." And the server, depending on how the software works in the server and how quickly it analyzes and the allowed lag time and so on, it might just let you win. And this is a common thing in the old Halo days. People would have lag switches. So eventually they built some software onto the servers which looked for lag switches and the sort of human element of lag switches. Like, does it look like they're pressing it in the time that's appropriate for getting kills frequently? If so, ban them, right? That's pretty much how it worked. So that's a quick history of hacking and DRM in video games. And so my viewpoint on this is I think they're doing it in the kind of wrong approach. I don't think it should be software based on the client's computer because, one, it pisses off your client, and two, it's not necessarily the most effective.
I will tell you that the challenge is having it server-based only. You can introduce a heck of a lot more hacks on the PC side that the server then has to interpret to understand whether it's a pattern. Where if it's on the PC, you can look for things that are more egregious, like additional software running, like you said, those kind of hacks or something where the packets are going through some filter before being sent. So I can understand the need of things like Punkbuster and stuff like that. I think the big concern on this one is that it's asking for that kernel level access so that it can look beyond just the interactions of what the game itself is doing and how it's communicating out, and look further into what your operating system's doing. And that is where I think that invasiveness is getting questionable and people have concerns, because beyond that, the regular Punkbusters, stuff like that, I've had very few issues with. And I have run into ones where there's some programs that the way they're set up, different anti-cheat software can cause issues with, and I've had to shut off in order to be run. But thankfully, it's fairly minimal. And so...
Yeah, I mean, in the end, there's always going to be cheaters. The other alternative, of course, is not a technological one. If people keep frequently reporting somebody as cheating, that's another way of noticing that they're probably cheating, right? And you can even then have a human look at the interaction between the networks and the computer and the client and the server and see what it's looking like. I think the kernel access is unnecessary. I think normal software is generally unnecessary. So the additional kernel access is very much unnecessary. So no, I think it's dumb. I think they're being a little bit 1984 about it, and I think it's a game in the end. I don't think that this level of privacy invasion is worthwhile. So as we're reaching the end of the show, I also want to give a shout out to the Accidentals because they just emailed me. So they have said that they have a power outage. Their power and internet is out where they're at, and they apologize and asked if we could reschedule. So we're free next week and maybe 2 weeks after that as well. So I'll email them and we'll hopefully have them back sometime soon in the near future. But I'm glad to hear they're okay. I was a little bit worried because, you know, when three people suddenly go MIA like that, you're like, are you guys okay? You know, like there's a pandemic going on. Some alarm goes off in your mind, right?
No, that's good that we got to hear from them, and hopefully, we'll figure it out. Hopefully we'll get hold of them. That would be wonderful, because I have been binging their music to try to be ready for this, and I have questions and thoughts now. Darn it. And if nothing else, it's like regardless, they've gained at least 1 or 2 new fans, because for me, this has all been new, and I've been sharing it as like, this is such good like energy. I'm really enjoying it. So preemptively, if you guys haven't heard of the Accidentals, check them out. We'll include a couple links in the show as we're finishing up today's, because they also have they've been doing daily what they call the daily breathe, and in that they've been doing like a quick meditative moment, playing a song live, and sharing some thoughts, as well as a book suggestion pretty much every day through this. They're on Spotify, they're on YouTube, they're all over the place. So I'll include some of the links so you can check them out and get prepped for when we do have them on the show. That would be wonderful. Like I said, both Ken and I are big fans. So cool.
Absolutely.
All right.
So you have listened to ShowX. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. You can follow us and subscribe and hit notifications and all that here on twitch.tv/VtWShowX. You can find us on Facebook. Search for Show Space X there to find us for all the updates there about the show and memes that I post and such. Find us on Instagram, VtWShowX. We got over 350 likes on one of our most recent posts there, so I felt very popular for a little while. It was very nice. Yes, they're on Spotify. Be sure to check them out. They're on YouTube as well, The Accidentals. Check them out there. Specifically, the song Michigan and Again is by far my favorite. They have a lot of good music, but that one is just so good. You can also support us by going to patreon.com/showx and donating $1 a month. That's very much appreciated. You can email us into showx at gmail.com, VtWShowX@gmail.com. Tell us all about your geekery and what you've been up to and any thoughts you have and any questions for the Accidentals as well. That's very much welcome. As well as check out Dr. David White, as I linked in the IRC earlier. If you just search for Dr. David R. White in Google, you can find him that way as well, University of Sheffield. If you want to get prepared for asking him any questions as well. He'll be on in 2 weeks' time. You can also find us on reddit.com/r/showx. That's much appreciated if you subscribe and upvote our stuff there. And of course, liking and sharing us is the best thing you can do, guys. So please tell your friends, retweet, rehost us on Twitch when we're live as well. All that stuff really helps. And we very much appreciate all your support. And we'll be back next week. Thank you very much for hosting, sir. We really appreciate you going through all the technical efforts and making sure this show runs smoothly every week of the year.
That I get to constantly see if I break stuff every week. No. No, thank you very much for being on again this week. We very much love seeing you, Ken, and keeping up with everything that's going on. And thank you all for tuning in. And we will check things out as we go forward. Keep an eye out on our feeds so we can let you know what's coming up. But we love having you, and we will catch you guys again next time. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye. See you next zombie. Good night.